Good evening. Good evening. Good evening to my entire Mosby Memorial Baptist Church family and to the entire virtual community. We welcome you back in this space. You know what that music is. That's our Tag Team Talk theme music. And we have another episode for you this evening, and we are excited about it. I've got some wonderful people from Interfaith Power and Light that are going to share with us. But in case you didn't know, Tag Team Talk was uniquely designed at the beginning of COVID-19. And COVID-19 brought about many different uncertainties that we're facing right now in our world. We're living in uncertain and unprecedented times. And all of us need some usable information that helps us to make informed decisions about how we move in our home, our homes and our communities and our world. And today, we're going to talk with our guests around the issues of voting, the title, Our Vote Matters, looking at immigration, examining climate change, and looking at how the church goes green. And so I have with me today, and excited to have them with us, three wonderful ladies who are going to talk to us about these issues. We have with us Reverend Dr. Faith Harris, and we also have with us Miss Kidest Gebere and Miss Leah Jones. Miss Kidest Gebere, she is the Communications and Education Coordinator at Interfaith Power and Light. Miss Leah Jones is the Faith Outreach Coordinator at Interfaith Power and Light. And Reverend Dr. Faith Harris, she is the director. She is the one who is the brainchild around this entire endeavor. And I know she's going to share with us what she does. I know she does so many different things, but I am excited to have all of you on. And on tonight, I want to start off by asking you all just to share a little bit about yourself, your title, and what you've been doing during this time of pandemic. Miss Kidest.
Thanks, Pastor Davis, and thank you so much for having us here to be able to share what we know and what we've learned working for the environment. My name is Kidest Gebere. I'm the Communications and Education Coordinator for Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. A little bit about me. I am actually an immigrant, and I migrated from Ethiopia in 2010. And I am a recent graduate of University of Richmond. And I got into working in the front lines for environmental justice when I met Kendall, which is also a director of Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, back in 2018. And I've just loved the mission that they do, and it has helped me grow my own spirituality and my own morality around justice and faith. And so I'm still here working as a communications person. So I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you just now, did you I don't think I heard just what?
I just graduated from University of Richmond. I'm
yes.
Quarantine 2020 babies. So
yes.
Wonderful.
Congratulations. Welcome, Kidest. We thank God for you. Miss Leah Jones, would you please just share a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me today. My name is Leah Jones. I'm the Faith Community Outreach Coordinator with Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. I also just graduated not that long ago in December from William & Mary. I studied biology and environmental science and policy. I guess I'll say a little bit more about myself and why I'm interested in this work and why I found Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. I've made it my mission post-graduation to, as I explore my career, just really work to reclaim green space for Black people in marginalized communities, including people of color specifically. I feel like that's my purpose in this work, and I feel as though Virginia Interfaith Power and Light is an amazing organization that does work related directly to that, directly to environmental justice. So that's me.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Leah. Thank you for being on with us. And Reverend Dr. Faith Harris, please, I know I got it wrong in the beginning, but please tell us about your work at Interfaith Power and Light. And if you can, we'll just move right into, because what many of us may not know is what Interfaith Power and Light does as its mission and vision. And so please share a little bit about your work there and about Interfaith Power and Light and what you all do.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I am Faith Harris, and I am the interim director, co-director for Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. It's an organization that I've volunteered with since 2015. I am currently just kind of filling in for the director, Kendall Crawford, who has some family issues that she needed to take some time off. So I'm just part-time filling in and look forward to Kendall's return shortly. Virginia Interfaith Power and Light is a relaunch of Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, and we relaunched it in 2016. A group of good volunteers came together to make sure that it did not lose its influence in the state of Virginia. And when we did so with the mindset that we wanted to focus on climate justice and environmental justice, and move the organization to be more concerned with what's going on frontline in communities of color and in rural communities and places where oftentimes are ignored in like in the news and in everyday policy. Virginia Interfaith Power and Light vision is we empower all faith communities across the Commonwealth of Virginia to achieve sustainable living. And we are people of faith collaborating to grow healthy communities and advance climate justice through education, advocacy, and worship. And so we think all three of those areas are very important to us. We're very proud of our education outreach work, and we do so with keeping in mind that we're working with faith communities of all backgrounds. We're interfaith, so that means we work with Muslim communities, we work with Jewish communities, we work with Buddhists, Sikhs, any group that is, and we have found that most every religion has some aspect of it that values the earth and that tells us the importance of the earth and caring for creation as part of our faith and a part of our maturation process. And so we focus on education, we focus on advocacy. So during General Assembly, we're there trying to ensure that legislation and laws and policies are instituted and passed that will make life better for our neighbors, our brothers and sisters, and for our planet. And to recognize that when we care for the planet, we're caring for and protecting our neighbors. And then we also find opportunities and count as important opportunities to worship and to dig into the faith aspect and the values and the morals aspect of this work. And so we find that putting all three of these together gives us a great opportunity to talk to pastors and to faith communities and rabbis and imams all across the state to help them help their communities and their membership grow in their understanding of why caring for the earth is part of their commitment to their faith tradition.
Yeah. And this episode in particular is part of the Climate and Pulpit partnership with Interfaith Power and Light, and Mosby is a wonderful recipient, blessed recipient of that partnership. Can you talk a little bit about that partnership and the Climate and the Pulpit endeavor that Interfaith Power and Light is engaged in?
Yeah, so we're putting together education and worship. One of the things we do every year is we launch what we call Climate in the Pulpits. It's actually Climate in the Pulpits on the Bema and in the minbar. And the Bema is for Jewish congregations, and I might be putting this backwards. Bema is for Jewish congregations, and that's the space where they preach from, and in the minbar for Muslim congregations. And so and it's an opportunity for clergy and people, faith leaders all across the state to focus one weekend or sometime during the month of October to talk about climate and the environment and creation in their sermons, or in showing a film, or in a Bible study, or in some other activity that they find useful. And so tonight we're doing that with Mosby as a conversation. And our focus and theme this year is vote, committing ourselves to climate justice and beloved community. And that we put that theme together, painstakingly agonized over putting the right words in there and making sure that we included a sense of community, that the whole idea of beloved community, if we want to be good neighbors, if we want to create a world where there's equality and equity, and where there's inclusion, and where there's justice, that it requires us to work for it, to act for it. And part of those of our responsibility, and part of that work, is voting every year in every election, not just for president, but for dog catcher, if your community votes in dog catcher, for the person, the clerk who takes care of who handles elections. Whatever election comes up in your community, we have a responsibility to help create the beloved community by voting in conscientious, uncorruptible, integrous, caring, thoughtful leaders to represent us, and to write, and to exercise good laws. And then the climate part of it, climate justice, we recognize that in reality, oftentimes people, when they've heard about climate change or global warming, they think of, their immediate thought is a polar bear, or maybe a dolphin, or maybe the coral reef. But when we talk about climate justice, we're talking about people. We're talking about caring for the planet, because the planet is our home, and it is the place that sustains us. And that, and in addition to that, for moral and religious reasons, it is, if we say we worship a God who created this, well, we care for the things that God creates. And so, so we're saying that voting is a sacred responsibility, a sacred right, and a gift. And that we do this work together and create this beloved community by voting and showing up each time to ensure that our democracy does not die.
Wonderful. And speaking of voting, we are less than 1 month away from the going to the polls and voting for our next president. If you have not already voted, November 3rd is the day. I want to, as we segue into our discussion and get into some of the issues, I want to share a piece from the Reflection Guide for Faith Communities that I think is very poignant for what we're doing right now and for this moment in time. It says, as people of faith across the country, we believe that the 2020 election is a referendum on the values that will shape our future. How can we renew our fragile democracy? How do we honor the human dignity of every person? Will we protect God's creation for future generations? What policies will prioritize the common good and confront global pandemics that remind us of our interdependence? These questions require a societal examination of conscience. It goes on further to say, many of the defining moral issues of our time are on the ballot. Extreme inequality of wealth and power, faltering democratic institutions, the existential threat of climate change, cruel immigration policies that tear apart families, mass incarceration that devastates communities of color, senseless gun violence, and threats to global public health and security. These challenges are daunting, and we must move forward in a spirit of hope and resist despair and cynicism. For generations, people of faith have been at the forefront of struggles for justice, leading seemingly unwinnable movements, from the abolition of slavery to women's suffrage and the civil rights movement. Religious activists have proven that faith and action are powerful catalysts for social change. And we have some civil rights activists with us this evening, Mosby. And I want to frame our conversation around 5 issues. I know 4 we'll get to, 5 possibly. Let me share them with you. They are democracy and voting rights, climate justice for our children and the world, immigration, and then going green. And what does that mean for the church and our communities? We've heard going green, but what does that really mean for us? And then 5, restorative racial justice. So let us begin with democracy and voting rights. To the panel, first I want to ask, how are our democratic values at risk today? We feel it, we may see it, but we may not be able to put it into or articulate exactly what it is that we're feeling, where we're sensing something isn't right with this, right? So how are our democratic values at risk today?
So I'm happy to jump in first. One of the ways that our democratic values are at risk is based on the idea of representative government. We believe, we were taught in school, in elementary school from the very beginning, that we vote for representatives to go and represent on our behalf, right? Our senators, our Congress, our Senate, our state senators, our state delegates, that they represent us in the legislature, which means that our expectation is that they will go and vote for and craft policies and laws that are for the common good, that are for the benefit of us all. And one of the ways that seems to be eroded over the last several election seasons is that our representatives don't seem to represent us in the way that we have wanted them to. That there often are representing, sometimes it seems, business interest over individual citizens' rights and protections for citizens. So one of the things that I think we can recognize as an erosion to the democratic values today is our legislators recognizing their responsibility to represent our wants, wishes, needs over and against those of corporate interest.
So that requires, in terms of helping to eliminate that erosion, it becomes important for us not to just go and vote.
Yes.
But it becomes important for us to follow up with those that we voted for and hold them accountable, and even really doing that work prior to going and casting my ballot.
Right. So that's why we were distributing this voter guide, to help people think about these issues before they vote, not just vote based on who has the great personality, or who is the strong man, or the strong woman, or who's pretty, or who's handsome, or who's, has a great smooth commercial, but who is actually who has the record, right? Who has the platform? Who has demonstrated that they have integrity of character first, right? And then beyond that, if they've been in legislative roles in the past, or to investigate, do your research. And I think we can do that as churches, right? As congregations, we can help each other with that to make the task less daunting. So that's one way. I think one of the other ways is, staying in touch with our legislators, right? Writing them, emailing them, calling their offices to let them know what your concerns are, what your wishes are, what you believe is right in a based on a particular legislation or issue that might be coming up in the General Assembly or in our local on our local councils or supervisors. So it's staying current, going to the meetings, going to when the supervisor has a meeting, showing up for that, going to participating in. We're nonpartisan, so we don't talk about what and who you should vote for. But we do think that it's important that once we have cast our vote, that we are keeping those legislators accountable and keeping them abreast of what our desires and needs are as citizens.
Ms. Kidest and Ms. Leah, do you all have anything that you all would like to add with regards to this erosion of our democracy and what might be some of the systemic barriers that keep folks from voting and keep folks from the polls?
I think one of the biggest issues is the idea of gerrymandering and and redlining communities so that votes are concealed in one area, and a certain Democrat or a certain Republican can have a say over one community, and that is done through gerrymandering and redlining communities, and that is also a big environmental issue. And so what folks can really do to be able to be tapped in is if they can't figure out, it's really hard to know, who's recommissioning, the districts and all the jargon behind it is really complicated. But if you're tapping into a very grassroots, organization, a nonprofit that knows that that's holding elected officials accountable, that is one way that you can know, who is in your district and who you should be able to tap into to be able to know what you need to know about voting, but also about the values that they're representing. Because a lot of times redistricting changes your elected officials, and it's really hard to be on point of, know who is representing you. So just putting your zip code and seeing that information is really important.
So it becomes important. You talk about gerrymandering and redlining. It becomes important that we are also in the midst of collecting information for the 2020 census. So it becomes
right.
even more important that we fill that information out with all of the correct information so that we can receive that our communities can receive some of the funding and resources that are needed in our communities, right?
Exactly.
Well, and in addition to that, not just the resources and funding, but to have the correct number of legislators that we can vote for. It matters how many, the population count tells us how many people will go to represent us in Congress, right, in the federal Congress. So, if we're constantly being undercounted, we are not receiving the representation that we should have. So, and that's something historic with among Black and Brown communities, really, that they have been historically undercounted for various reasons. But this year, I think it's a particular concern because we see that the government is not as ambitious about voting. I mean, about counting every vote, every person, I should say.
Ms. Leah, I don't want to leave you out, Ms. Leah. Would you like to add?
Yes, really just echoing a lot of what Faith and Kidest already said, but in general, I think one of the most important things to remember when we go to the ballot and are thinking about voting is that this is like, it's claiming that power for ourselves. It's not just something passive. If we're claiming to be a nation of democracy, this is supposed to be built upon the people. If you're not using the things that the system has put in place in order for us to voice what we want, we're working against ourselves in the long run. You know what I mean? And furthermore, the fact that Black and brown communities especially, I guess, are left behind a lot of the times when we talk about legislation and voting, is because for some reason, or one of the reasons even, is that it seems inaccessible, you know? It seems far away, rather than just like what Faith and Kidest already mentioned, seeking those resources for ourselves. If the government isn't doing what it's supposed to do, if our legislators aren't doing what they're supposed to do, we do hold them accountable. And we make those efforts ourselves to amplify that and expose it, and take that power for ourselves. So when we see that people are working against us, and the system is even working against us with gerrymandering, with redlining, or even I saw a post not that long ago that said somebody had robbed the registrar, like the mailers box with people's votes. You know, we see those things. It's done purposefully, and it's in neighborhoods where, you know, people may not recognize it, may not really go the extra effort to complain about it. That's intentional, and it's an attack. So we have to be the ones to hold the system and our communities accountable, because it's a community. I think we've forgotten that on a lot of levels.
So it becomes, so going to the poll booth, Leah, is our power. We are expressing and we are sharing that we have power, and it becomes critical, in particular with this, not just this election, but when we get to midterms as well. We need to make sure that those people that are representing us are in the seats making those legislative decisions, as we saw back in 2013, right, with the Supreme Court decision overturning some of the areas with the civil rights, with the voting rights, right, and how those changes. Dr. Harris, you came to Mosby and showed us a video on how these particular states and counties and communities begin to gerrymander and redline. And if we do not go out and vote and cast our voice, we will lose power. So let me make this thing clear. Let me step in. Let me say this. So if you are in a place where you are on the fence and you don't feel like you can vote for anyone, I need you to understand and know that if you do not go to the polls, you still are casting a vote. And it becomes critical and important for all of us to go to the polls and to share and express our power and let the world know that I'm here. So if you don't think that your vote matters, just begin to look at history, begin to look at how all of these decisions of policy and power are determined. And if you do not go vote, you do not have anything to say about what someone does that is in Congress or in the Senate.
I agree with that, Pastor Davis, and I think that that's a critically important aspect. I wrote a piece today for our newsletter about my birthday is next week, and
Happy early
My birthday's on the 13th, October 13th, which is the last day to register to vote. Mm-hmm. And I talked a little bit about why it was so important to me. Like, the most important thing to me when I turned to 18 was getting that registration card. I was so proud because it was a rite of passage. It was me crossing over from childhood to adulthood, that I got to participate in the legislative process. I had an opportunity to go and vote and have my voice heard based on who I voted for. And I think that that's so important for people to understand, that we are in this together, that voting is sacred, that really that vote, because of our if we were in a different kind of government, right, or a different kind of state where democracy was not our form of government, then it might be something different. But in this context, we are responsible, and I believe that God sees us as responsible. How we take care of the poor, the immigrant, the widowed is based on us voting. Based on us participating in the democracy, participating in the public square.
Absolutely. So let's move forward to the second piece. The second piece is climate justice for our children and our world, right? Our world is out of balance. We are seeing this every day. Not just balance, it may not be in balance spiritually, but when you look at the physical aspect of the world, right? All of the wildfires that are happening, all of the hurricanes and the severity of those hurricanes and storms that we are seeing, right? And also with this current pandemic that we find ourselves in. Watch the Netflix when this all jumped off. Netflix had a documentary entitled Pandemic, and I had no idea that people had jobs where they travel all around the world and they find out when the next possible break of flus and pandemics and the possibility of different diseases. I had no idea. I like Netflix now. I'm good. So pandemic helped me to really see that we are really all interconnected, right? And so one of the things that I want to ask you all with regards to climate justice is, how do we begin to address these issues of climate justice at the local levels in our churches, in our communities of faith, and our communities in general?
I can go ahead and answer this first. I think first, I'll say something that Faith actually shared with me when I first started working here, which was just a few months ago. But she expressed to me that she felt like the work that she does with Virginia Interfaith Power and Light is a form of worship for her, a way that she shows thanks for God's creation, and that has really stuck with me every day. Honestly, when I think about it, Faith, I don't know if you know that, but I think that's something to keep in mind. And honestly, also, I think we can learn a lot from observing the interconnectedness of the literal physical earth. The water that runs in the streams, that runs down to our soil, that is evaporated into the air, and it's all interconnected, and these things all depend on one another. And I think in many ways, we are a part of that cycle. And furthermore, we as people and as a society work in an interconnected way as well. And I think that's one of the most important things to recognize first, when you say that you're a person of faith, to care for God's creation. It is something that there's only one. there's only one Earth. And
Yes.
I would like to think anyways that we are maybe here as to be protectors of it. And I think that's something very important to keep in mind. And also, Faith mentioned earlier, just talking about climate justice and what that really means. When we say climate justice, it's not just about the earth, it is also about the justice of people. There is no justice without climate justice. It is all encompassing. And in many ways, people are suffering because of injustices related to environmental issues. Here, even in the city of Richmond and overseas. So once again, this interconnectedness, this idea of community, I think that's something that should be, if not at the forefront of everyone's mind, at least maybe third bracket or something. But
Right.
that's my take on it.
Right. And that's very important. So when we talk about justice, we are talking about climate justice,
Yes.
right? And when we go to the polls, Leah, we are talking about regaining our power, right? And so, to stand behind the podium and say that, well, making it personal, that it's this person's fault for the reason why the wildfires are the way they are. I mean, that becomes crazy. So it's that kind of thinking that we need to be clear of for the folks that we're voting for, that it's not just about the wildfires, but it ultimately has to do with everything that is going on. The reason why we are in this pandemic and why we seem to kind of ebb and flow up and down with the numbers and the infection rate. That is all part of what is happening. Dr. Harris?
Well, what I wanted to say is to give a couple of examples that are close by to all of us. Our friends and our neighbors who live in Charles City are right now in the midst of a resisting two fracked gas fire plants. Right, they produce electricity, but using gas, and these two, they're proposed to be built there in Charles City, in addition to a landfill. So we're talking about concentrated pollutants, right? Concentrated infrastructure, fossil fuel infrastructure that gives off air pollution and water pollution. In addition to giving off the pollution, it will use up millions and millions of gallons of water. That in fact, there's no guarantee that water will be usable again. And so, and then we have a landfill there that actually no landfill ever built has not leaked. All of them leak at some point. And so whatever those chemicals, the breakdown of the chemicals and the waste and the methane gases and all of those polluting, decaying waste matter, end up in our water table at some point. And so these are the kinds of issues that we come alongside communities to try to help them first understand all of the hazards, but also to help them plan a strategy to restore some balance back to their communities. So that's just one. So oftentimes these industries choose communities that are mostly Black and brown or indigenous, Charles City, poor or have less economic power, and they come in and they tell the supervisors and people, oh, we can give you this and it'll bring jobs and it'll bring money and but in fact, they rarely bring permanent jobs. They leave with higher incidents of asthma, COPD, cancer. And Charles City already is a hotspot. So, and then when we add these, and when we say hotspot, we're talking about areas of concentrated pollution. And so this is the kind of thing that we do, and this is why we think it's so important for faith communities to understand and to be aware of what's happening around them and happening to their neighbors.
That's good. One of our so those of you, we are on Facebook Live. Reverend Marlene Forrest of St. Philip's Episcopal just shared, being protectors of the creation is how our indigenous siblings view it. Protectors as we co-create with God in caring for God's creation for the betterment of the creation. So that whole Genesis account that we have been given the power and the authority not to misuse or abuse, but to be partners in creation. So
to be stewards, to be caretakers.
Stewards, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, systematic theology,
and that has been that idea of stewards has been perverted for many years to be subduers, and to subdue something is very different than to care for it or to be a steward of it.
That's good. Not subdue, but to
care for.
Yes. Co-creators, yes. So let me stay on that issue of climate justice. And I want to move towards our next subject, which is immigration. And Kidest, I want you to jump in here, and I want to ask the question, why and how, for those who may not know the connections, why and how is immigration a climate injustice issue, and how does it connect with our voting? And help us to tie that together.
Yeah. So immigration being a justice issue, at least from, without looking at what does, xenophobia mean, what, without going into the racist and very anti-immigrant and very nativist approach that a lot of white supremacist groups try to approach this topic with. I'm going to try to stay away from that as much as I can and just talk about the connection between climate justice and justice in general and immigration.
You can bring it back up when we get to number 5.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. I got it.
But yeah, so just looking at just numbers, over 85% of immigrants in the U.S. are considered people of color. That means they come from Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, Asia, or some parts of the world that that's not mostly majority white. So that in itself alone brings up this idea of racial justice and racial injustice issues when we see how they are treated in whether it be immigration offices or immigration detention centers. So that is ICE and all the recent news that we've seen about the vasectomies that's been going on in ICE and how most of them are done on Haitian immigrant mothers. So just tying that racial justice and immigration justice is really, really important, because oftentimes the Black voices are left out of immigration voices. We're concentrated on Latin America because of the geographical approximation, but we tend to forget a lot of folks from the Caribbean and Africa that are refugees, and they're climate refugees most of the time. They come from environments that are they come from countries that are facing environmental degradation. So in terms of a lot of African nations, I can talk about my own example. In Ethiopia, we have, because of development and a lot of infrastructure, it's not always, gas and fossil fuel infrastructure, but it is some form of infrastructure that subdues the earth and creates a lot of environmental degradation and doesn't work with the earth. So what folks tend to do is they can't farm and they can't work on their land anymore. So they are forced to migrate and forced to leave their home and migrate into other places that they could, for different economies. So that's a direct connection between climate injustice, where we damage the earth, and when we subdue the earth, we kind of force folks to uproot their, long traditional way of life of focusing on the earth and nurturing the earth, and now they're forced to become climate refugees, and leaving their home. And another way is, a lot of folks are leaving their homes because it's too hot to live there anymore, or because the seas are coming way too close to their homes, and so on. So when we talk about climate refugees, we also have immigrants. We have to also talk about this idea of climate refugees becoming more and more prominent and more common. And one thing that we can do is, when we vote for clean air and clean water, and when we vote for folks that promote protecting the earth here, we're not just affecting our earth, the U.S. earth. We're not just affecting the Virginia air. We're affecting the global, climate. We're affecting earth in a global term. So there is a connection between that local voting and your power, and that local sense of, casting your ballot affects a very large chain of global change and global climate change for the better.
So again, Ms. Kidest, that was good. So again, if you're thinking about saying my vote doesn't matter and it just doesn't matter, why go to the polls? Let me come over there and meet you and give you a ride.
Yes.
So I just want to bring Leah and Dr. Harrison, if they would like, just to kind of piggyback on what Ms. Kidest shared with us. And that was, that was powerful, and that said a lot as to immigration and justice and how we should be seeing this thing. Leah, Dr. Harris?
Well, the only thing that I would add is just the biblical. We have numerous biblical stories, mandates, directives that, if we claim the Bible as our sacred book, where the immigrant, the stranger in the land, the alien, is to be cared for, cherished, taken care of, and given a welcome. And
that's what God says.
That's what the Bible says.
What other people say. That's what God said.
Yes. And so I think that we can't really call ourselves following a tradition, at least the Christian tradition, or even, you can't even say the Jewish tradition, because a lot of these texts are from the Hebrew text. And so we are mandated by our faith tradition, by our values and our morals, that we ought to stand up for and protect and welcome, not just care for, but welcome the immigrant. And we don't have time to go. We could do a whole show on immigration, but the truth is, the boundaries are all arbitrary and created by, as a result of 500 years of exploitation and extraction and genocide perpetrated by the church and kings.
Not the church.
Oh yeah, the church. Yes.
Okay, let me stop. So, Miss Leah, did you want to add anything?
No, I think honestly, Kidest and Faith said it all. And really, if anything else, I'd just like to point out again the interconnectedness and caring for community and creating a beloved community.
A beloved community, yes. So with that, so let me move on to number 4. And Miss Leah is going to jump in here. So I want to talk about going green. And what does you said in your introduction that that is what you feel you have been purposed to do, to look at what does going green and how does that interact with justice for Black and brown bodies, and what does that look like in terms of bringing forth and going and acting and bringing forth that justice for our communities of faith. So what does this mean, Leah?
Yeah, I think especially with the larger conversation that we just had and all the things that we just talked about, it can seem like a huge topic to tackle. And I guess maybe even it seems like it could be too much even to be a part of when you consider going green, or it may be too expensive, or anything else. But I think a lot of the times people forget that it doesn't have to be huge. It could be casting your vote, which is huge, but casting your vote. It could be switching from using the bags at the grocery store to bringing your own reusable tote. It could be planting your own vegetable garden. It could be supporting your local farmers market. It could be switching to less plastic materials and using more reusable ones, even when we're talking about in the church. Maybe having your own community garden, or finding ways to maybe go solar, having seed money to start to go invest.
Let me pause right there. Community garden, Mosby Memorial Baptist Church, community garden.
Yes,
one of the ways that we can begin to combat this all of these pollutants and these things that are happening, right? So I'm sorry, Ms. Leah, go ahead.
Yes. Anyways, yes, community gardens, finding ways to start investing in solar energy, even finding ways to reduce your waste. I know now it may not be as much of an issue because of COVID, but I know for a fact churches are dinners, lunches. I know those plastic materials all are used, and they're thrown away, and they end up sitting in a landfill.
Ma'am, I thought you were going somewhere else with. I thought you were about to say the church eats too much. And no, but you weren't going that way.
No,
you were talking about the plastic containers that we take home, and we need to get that. We need to get that second helping, or we need to get. I'm taking one for my auntie.
Right, and these
all
are
of those things, right? Those become issues. I'm just teasing, but those become issues and to our environment. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. And can end up in the landfills that Faith mentioned earlier in Charles City County. And to be honest, one of the biggest ways that even your church could go green is with our VAIPL mini grant challenge for green futures, which is an initiative that we started about a couple months ago. This program centers on civic engagement. So we actually have a Faith, Climate, Justice voter pledge, which reminds people to commit to voting for climate justice. So everything that we've talked about thus far, and downloading this voter guide that we're discussing, that these questions that we're discussing are coming from right now. And with churches who have the highest participation of taking this pledge and downloading the voter guide that we're going through right now, are eligible or can be eligible to earn up to a $500 grant to building and working towards those green futures. So even starting a green community, a green team, a green ministry, to think of ways that you can go green in your church.
Agree.
Even if it's finding ways to buy reusables, investing in renewable energy like solar, or even starting a rain garden. There are very simple ways that you can get involved and reduce your impact on this earth.
And may I add to that the Green Challenge, we have how many churches that we have up to 20 grants, and I think we have how many churches that have, or congregations that have already signed up, Leah?
Right now we have 10.
So these 10 churches are in the challenge. So we're asking for the pastors and clergy or leaders to ask and try to get everyone in your congregation to pledge to be a climate justice voter and to download the guides, or we can give you hard copies of the guides. But the main point is to go online, fill out the form to be a climate justice voter, saying and pledging that in every election you will vote with climate as in the forefront of your mind. As well, we will not just leave you hanging by giving you just $500. We have resources and organizations that we can connect you with if you want to, like Leah suggested, to install a rain garden. What's a rain garden? A rain garden is a way to put in. It's a garden that actually will keeps the water from just running off into the sewer, and it gives it time to seep back into the earth, and so that it can be the part of the cycle, right? The biological or I forget what it's called, like ecological cycle of the water. Cleansing. So instead of it running off into the gutters with oil and all the other things that it picks up, it actually has time to sit there and seep back into the earth. So there's rain garden. You can do so many things, and Leo has a list of great things that you can do with this funding. But it's something that we're hoping that congregations will take the challenge, and so that we can be a partner with us to go green.
So Leah, there's a number of initiatives that Faith just said. Is that something that you could email to us, share with us? I guess would you be the one that we would partner with in talking about how do we get this off the ground?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. We can email, we can phone call, we can
Zoom?
I'm sorry,
Zoom?
what? We can Zoom. Yes. We can Zoom.
Okay.
As soon as you would like. You just need to register your congregation for the challenge and get everyone to take that pledge and download those voter guides.
All right. Okay. So we've got 3 minutes for white supremacy.
Oh.
Where do we start?
Restorative and racial justice, and I want to hear what your thoughts regarding this question. How can we dismantle the evil ideology of white supremacy in our culture, in our political systems, in everything that it touches, and that's everything. So how do we begin to dismantle the evil ideology of white supremacy?
So I'm going to jump in here first and say that, because this is, dear to my heart, that we need to first recognize that it is part and parcel, and it is embedded in our religious tradition. And I said earlier that it was kings from Europe and the church, right, that created the problems of boundaries and some of the things that we're talking about when we talked about immigration. But when we talk about climate change itself, we ought to recognize that we can start with the 500 years of European colonialist story of people leaving Europe, going throughout the world, removing cultures, moving people, thousands, millions of people from Africa to this new world. The genocide that happened to the indigenous people in South and North America, as well as all of the extraction and the subduing and destroying of ecological systems all over the planet. And what that did was, and then we couple that with some of the mass production that happened in the early 1900s, and the ways that we have ramped up the use of natural resources and burning off fossil fuels and that come from burning trees and that come from burning oil and come from gas. All of these things have added up to be all these issues that we're talking about in climate change started there. And it started with this superior attitude and belief that the Europe and the church was given by God the right to do this to the earth because the other peoples of the earth were not Christian. And so if we can't start there and acknowledge that and recognize where we continue that conversation, where we continue that narrative, we will never be able to dismantle the evil ideology of white supremacy. And so we first recognize it, we first acknowledge it, and then we need to reject it. That doesn't mean we reject the church. That doesn't mean we reject Europeans. It means we reject the narrative, right, the belief system that holds all that together. And there is a difference. Mm-hmm. So that means we have to reread our Bibles. It means we have to reread our world. It means we have to reestablish new ways of doing things and not be so inflexible and unwilling to change the way we do things, because it has brought havoc on our earth and havoc on our neighbors. And we see it every day. And while we can't trace the pandemic directly to climate change, we know that it is the encroachment of humans into spaces where they don't belong, and extracting where we don't need to extract, that exposed humans to these pathogens. Man, so I start there.
Others? A whole lot there. Yes. No, okay. that was no. But what you said was helpful and needs to kind of be extracted to the point of really looking at the different layers mm-hmm. that white supremacy impacts every aspect of our lives. Kidest and Leah, do you want to share and jump in and add anything?
Yeah, I just have a quick add, and I agree with what Reverend Faith Harris has said wholeheartedly. And part of that is learning that, you don't have to be white to uphold white supremacy necessarily. So you have to look at, for me as a Black woman, I'm going to look at how I act every day and how, the language that I use every day and the justice that I'm dedicated to every day to make sure it doesn't align with any type of white supremacist ideals. So when we wake up and we go to work, we have to think to ourselves and say, am I, doing anti-racist work? Am I actively rejecting white supremacy in everything that I do? Or am I not? So we have to be able to be super personal and get down to, our own actions and our own beliefs and how we are acting on our beliefs, so that, we're not upholding white supremacy. We're actually working against it actively. So I think when we talk about, how do we dismantle this big ideology, because it's so seeped into everything that we are, we know and we learn, and it's it's global. We have to look at how, we're moving and how, how we're being anti-Black amongst ourselves, among our communities. So, yeah.
Leah, that was good. Thank you, Leah.
Yes, I was just really bouncing off of Kidest because I love that she chose the word actively fighting against white supremacy. The same way that we can sit passively and not vote, or sit passively and not take initiative to do things that we know need to happen to have a better community. Fix the broken system, or a system that was really never put in place for us from the beginning, or people of color from the beginning. So choosing to be active about rejecting that white supremacy. And like Kidest said, thinking about every day, what is your part in this fight? Because white supremacy works hard. White supremacy at this point doesn't even have to work, but we need to work harder in order to defeat it.
And with that, I'm sorry to say that we're done. But we could continue this conversation for another couple of hours. I'm so glad for Miss Kidest Gebere, Miss Leah Jones, and Reverend Dr. Faith Harris for being my guests tonight on Tag Team Talk. We are continuing to tackle the issues of our day in the midst of a pandemic and racial unrest and everything that is going on in our communities and across this nation and world. So, to my Mosby family, I love you, and I'm going to see you real soon. To the entire virtual community, thank you for joining with us on this virtual space and digital space, and allowing us to come into your homes and living rooms, wherever your digital devices take you. We are so glad that you allowed us to talk about these issues relating to voting, immigration, climate change, and the church going green. God bless you all. Thank you to my guests. I love you. Thank you so much for imparting such wisdom to all of us. So, to all my tag team folks, I'll see you. You take care. Have a great evening.